I'm Mark Wittenberg. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the City of Raleigh. I wanted to welcome you all. I'd like to introduce Steve Rao. He is going to be your moderator for this session, which is talking about what we were talking about in the keynote, which is how do we build a connected community? How do we build that? And then more importantly, how do we sustain it? But Steve is from the city of Morrisville and is a council member and is, I know, very passionate about technology and how technology can be leveraged to add value in the community. So with that, Steve.
Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be here today. I did want to say I'm very proud of the town of Morrisville. Our CIO, Rick Ralph, is here, Billy Whitehead, and of course, Brandon Zuidema is on the panel. And we're just so excited about Morrisville doing really a lot of great things in smart cities. And Brandon's going to talk a little bit about that. Before we begin to introduce this wonderful panel, what I'll say is that it's such an exciting time to be in IoT. Just a few weeks ago, I had a 30-minute virtual coffee with John Chambers, who used to run Cisco. I knew his mom and dad. He's from West Virginia. And John told me that he's just so excited about AI. I know we talked about the opening keynote, and IoT. Out of the 16 companies that he's invested in, 3 are AI companies, and they're all billion-dollar companies today. So I think it's just really exciting what we can do to grow that kind of innovation ecosystem here in the Triangle. And I've learned about smart cities that it's really about leveraging the quality of services to our residents and keeping your residents engaged. And that's what I've really learned from this whole experience. So with that being said, I'm honored today to introduce a wonderful panel. First, we have Brandon Zuidema. Brandon is the new town manager in Morrisville. He has been serving our community since 2019 as he was our deputy manager, and he has 30 years of experience in local government. He's also spent 10 years in the town of Garner as their chief of police, and he's worked in New York and Virginia. We want to welcome you, Brandon. Thank you for being on the panel. And he makes the council members look very good. Second, we have David Ihrie, the Chief Technology Officer of the Virginia Innovation Partnership. As the CTO for the Virginia Innovation Partnership Corporation, Dave has designed and launched several VIPC strategic initiatives, including the Virginia Smart Community Testbed. The VIPC creates technology-based economic development strategies to accelerate innovation, imagination, and the next generation of technology and tech companies and entrepreneurs. And today he is responsible for deploying smart technology across the Commonwealth of Virginia. So really focusing on cross-jurisdictional data sharing. So thank you so much for being here, David. And we have David I, who is the Director of Customer Solutions and Strategic Partner Alliances. David is responsible for building teams to identify solutions for private and public clients with Allied Digital and leads their system integration for smart cities, smart buildings, and IoT across the United States. Allied Digital provides a wide range of infrastructure solutions to communities around the globe, and David brings a global perspective as well, as he's done a lot of this stuff around the world. So please join me in welcoming David I. So I have a lot of questions here. I'm going to do my best to get through them. Might combine a few and want to definitely take a few minutes of getting questions from the audience. So I'm first going to start with Brandon Zuidema. Brandon, Morrisville has gone from literally nowhere just a few years ago to now being a nationally recognized leader in smart cities, getting an award last year in Denver from the Smart Cities Council, getting an award from Governor Cooper and Secretary Jim Weaver at the Digital Summit. Could you talk a little bit about the town of Morrisville smart city programs? How did you get to where you are today? What are some of the benefits you're seeing for residents, and what do you see in the future?
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So we've gotten to where we are because we have some really, really smart and creative and innovative staff. Two of them that are leading our program in the audience, Rick Ralph, our CIO, Billy Whitehead, our Smart Cities Program Manager. They have accelerated this so quickly and in my non-technological background way, really, really amazingly to get us to where we are. And again, we also have the support of our council. Councilmember Rao is a longtime proponent of the use of technology in smart cities, so he is a driving force. We have other council members that are also interested in this process, and not necessarily smart cities, but for us, it's about community engagement. And I think that's what's been a real benefit to us is, we are always looking to engage with our community any different way we can. So our community is, we are next to RTP, for those of you that may not recognize that. So we have a lot of folks in our community that work in tech jobs, so they're very interested. Our most recent advisory committee is our Smart City Steering Committee that was started about 2 years ago, give or take. So that brings additional resources to the table to support us, but we're making use of that to, again, really try to better engage our community. So we're doing that primarily through our Smart City dashboard. A ton of data and information is available to the community that wants to go and look for it there. We're also using it specifically in a couple of areas. One is certainly our parks. So we are using sensors to track activity, to track data. If, for example, if you want to go to Church Street Park and play tennis, you can go to the dashboard and see if it's busy and see when it might be expected to free up. And again, as a non-technological guy, I'm like, wow, that's actually pretty cool, because I would have just driven to the park and hoped for the best. And then we're doing the same thing. One of our other parks, we have installed moisture sensors, a park that we typically have a lot of issues with because it's in and near a floodway. So now that can automatically activate signs at the park to open and close based on the conditions of the field. I mean, just a couple of examples of where I think we're going and the benefits that we see in keeping our community informed.
Thank you, Brandon. We'll come back to you on that. We're going to go with David now, and if you could explain a little bit about the VIPC, the organization, but then really, we have, for all of you, I'm going to start with you on this general question, and during the panel, I'd like to get your input, but we have in Wake County 13 local governments, but we don't have a lot of, cities other than Raleigh and Cary and now Morrisville. So how do you, one thing we want to know is about, your advice for the Triangle region on how we share best practices better. How do we foster more regional collaboration?
Yeah, thank you. So first about the organization. So VIPC is actually an extension of the executive branch in Virginia. We're created by a special authority for the legislature, but operate as a not-for-profit. And so I have statewide purview. Our goal is to help communities across the state, and I will say that the most important thing is sort of committed leadership. So, the kinds of things that you're doing, I think, are exemplary. One of the things that we are doing increasingly is we run a number of pilot projects with IoT, with cybersecurity, with various technologies, and because we're sort of a centralized function, we can act as a repository of expertise and use that to help leverage the expertise now that's being built in individual communities. So I think we have certainly some places in Virginia. Fairfax County is very technically advanced and do a lot with technology, but they're not doing everything across the board. There are other communities that don't have an IT manager because they're so small. And so how can we help bring those communities into the productive use of technology for economic development? And so there, we can either support with our expertise, having played with a number of these technologies, or we can connect those communities to other communities around the state that have that kind of expertise.
Fantastic. We'll come back to you and ask you some follow-ups on that. And for David you're a massive systems integrator, so you've got the excitement of providing your infrastructure. So what is your perspective as a systems integrator in terms of how you can get cities, counties, and private industry to bring the needed technology and infrastructure to our residents?
Great question. So I think one of the best things that the best paths to be able to answer that is, you saw this morning with Jim next door, he talked about the Dell technologies, talked about looking at the outcomes. So you start with the people. What is the business outcomes in the very end? So once we understand that, then we can start beginning an approach around aligning to overcoming those barriers that get in the way. And I think one of the biggest things we see is the need for open communication and able to break down those barriers, if you will. We become a bit of a mediator to where we understand the larger community of technologies, the strategic partnerships and alliances that have to be into place. We either have them already or we will build them creatively for each individual city needs. And this also helps expedite that idea around digital transformation, looking at cyber end-to-end, bringing the ability of cross-jurisdictional communication together that drives risks down. And another key point is I've heard a lot about, the city's desires to want to get to the next level and try to decrease that cycle time and how to do that. So one of the things we do at Allied is we bring to market a faster, easier way to process a proof of concept. And in that proof of concept, that's done early on with little to no budget to execute a microcosm of what would really happen for the fully executed solution.
Fantastic. I'm going to go to Mr. Ihrie as a follow-up to that and go back to Brandon. But, we've had a lot of success in Morrisville with entrepreneurial companies piloting with us. Today, we have a company named Sam IT Analytics that's here at Veridex, and they work with us to create the Smart City Dashboard, right? So, Tom Snyder, I want to commend his leadership at Riot, all the things he's doing with Riot, the incubator, demo day, that startup showcase today. How does this tie into economic development? Can you cite specific examples that, what can we take from this panel and go to Governor Cooper or go to Secretary Sanders or even Chris Chung to see, why should they be getting behind smart cities?
Yeah, and kudos to Tom Snyder as well. We also work with Riot in Virginia. So, I think our sweet spot as an organization is actually with small early stage innovators. So we do investment programs. We coordinate across all the accelerators and incubators and so forth in Virginia. If you look at the data, most of the net new job creation that happens in the United States comes from companies that are less than 5 years old. And so that engine of job growth and of creativity is just critical to how we do economic development. I think the kind of the rubric of smart communities is really about how you understand data and how you use data for the benefit of the communities that we live in. And so it's critical kind of as we move to the future, how are we going to bring those capabilities into the workforce, into the community? How are we training people who are coming into the workforce, both with the skill sets, but also with the entrepreneurial mindset to help create those jobs.
So these successful companies can get capital and they start hiring jobs, and then that's
exactly right. And again, we're I think fortunate as an organization, so we have both the strategic initiatives, the ability to conduct pilot projects and to implement technology in various communities. We also have the investment side under a single roof. So my colleague next door does equity investments in early stage companies. The next person over actually runs a grants program. So, it's in that sense we're a bit of a single stop shop for early stage companies, for entrepreneurs looking to grow their technologies or their products.
Fantastic. Going to go back to Brandon. Brandon, I'm going to put it in two small questions for you. First, you're new in your role, and Morrisville's got a lot of innovative projects going on. What do you got planned in the future? Any ideas there? And then as a follow-up, how you work a lot across the region with other managers. You're very well known. What advice do you have about how Morrisville and other local governments that are having success share it with other local governments in the region?
Thanks, Steve. So, in terms of where we're heading, obviously continued expansion of what we have started in the parks in terms of using that technology to better inform users and visitors and residents that may want to go to the parks. That's always powerful. Expanding the use of our dashboard, making that more available through advertising and outreach, and making sure that the residents are aware that it exists, I think is really important. One of the things that I'm excited about is the concept of smart corridors. And so I realize this may be unique to Morrisville, but we've got some traffic issues. And then we also have some safety concerns on a lot of our roadways. So with smart corridors, one, it's going to help us with potentially expediting traffic flow and making better use of that through monitors and sensors. But then from a safety standpoint, it's also going to help us with recording, where are there not only accidents but near misses that you might not otherwise know about, and that helps you be better informed as to how to address those types of concerns. We've started that very preliminarily, and this is actually a regional approach. This maybe ties into the other question. So we have a sort of a unified fire department among 3 communities in Cary, Apex, and Morrisville. And so they operate essentially as one fire department. So we dispatch the closest unit, we share resources, they respond together, they train together. And so we have implemented preemption to make sure that they're getting to where they need to get as quick as is practical, because seconds literally count in the fire service. And so that has been implemented on all of our fire apparatus, and not only in Morrisville, but also if we head into Cary, the same thing. Those lights are going to preempt because we're all in the same system. So that's, I think, a really excellent example of where we're headed. Your question about, I think, regionalism, that's one little example of what we're doing. We're also working with other municipalities. We've just made a joint grant application for another Smart Cities project that we hope will come through. So I think as one example. But really for communities that aren't necessarily doing smart cities now, my best advice is do something. Like, you don't have to start with this all-encompassing master plan that's going to take 10 years to implement and millions of dollars. Do something. Start out with something small, demonstrate how it works, get a little proof in the pudding, if you will, that allows better support from the community for additional funding. If you have council members that may not be convinced, great opportunity to show them, hey, look at what we've done, and it works, and it's helping your performance as a council member, it's helping our performance as staff to keep community involved. So a lot of opportunities out there.
Okay. I'm going to ask thank you so much, Brandon. I'm going to ask a few more questions and open up the audience, and we'll come back because there's just so many questions to ask. So I'm going to do a question for both David, Ihrie, and Dave I. What experiences do you have any experiences on the challenge you had of building a smart region, and any advice based on the experiences that what we can learn from and do a better job here?
Sure. I think some things that might be overlooked is, cities, counties, municipalities trying to take on more of it on their own, as opposed to relaxing the gates a little bit and connecting to more private industry to bring things together. For example, rural communities that are trying to get, improved infrastructure to support remote workers. So they're challenged with, funding they need to get in place to bring high-speed data out to homes and businesses in far out rural areas where the tax bases are lower. So, some resolutions around that, for example, are, combining efforts with telecom companies, infrastructure, power, utility companies. So utility is doing a piece of it. It's broken out in phases. You mentioned, not trying to take on the whole pie at once, just breaking it down into phases. So that's an example where utilities are working to deploy fiber. The telecom companies are working in the second stage to support it. And then on the very end, the ISP is setting up and establishing the cloud services and interconnectivity. So, these are 3 totally different companies working together with counties and cities, municipalities, and regional communities to take something that would have taken 10, 15 years and be able to do it in 1 to 3 years.
Fantastic. David, your insights on that?
Yes, I think a lot of what we're focusing on now is how you build those collaborations. And part of the reason I'm here is we'd like to do that across the state lines as well. So, if I look at flooding, for example, on the Roanoke River, that affects both Virginia and North Carolina. And so how can we effectively manage to share that data? Or we do a lot of work with the Department of Homeland Security, and a big focus there on emergency management, on how you get, the emergency response community to work across jurisdictions. I think one of the things that I'm bullish about has been effective for us at the state level in getting agencies to share data, the traditionally stovepiped agencies. We've put together a thing called the Commonwealth Data Trust, and so it's actually a legal trust entity where the chief data officer is the trustee. What it enables from a data governance point of view is every time I want to do a new project, I don't need to do 20 data sharing agreements between each of the individual entities. It acts as a mechanism where each agency can do a single data sharing agreement with the data trust, and then on a project-by-project basis, authorize different uses of the data. But in all of those cases, the data owner, the originator of the data, maintains control over who can see their data, who can share it for what purposes. So I think that mechanism for controlled data management, data governance, and we've put forward the hypothesis that will scale to a national level. So if I have an entity in Virginia, that's a member of a national version of that. And if there's a comparable entity in North Carolina that's also a member of that national version, now we have a direct mechanism on a very rapid basis to be able to share data. So if an emergency happens on the border, we already have the legal agreements in place. All we need to do is instantiate that project.
Okay, fantastic. One last question for Brandon, then we're going to open up the audience and then come back with a few more questions. How are we doing for time? We're doing okay? 40? 20 minutes. Okay, good. 40 minutes. I can keep going, filibuster, right? For Brandon, one of the things, and I want to make this more of a work session, so please share ideas, and I think this can be a work in process, but I'd like to see, we have a mayor of Wake Forest here, Mayor Cawley may be coming from Morrisville, but we don't see a lot of cities here, so how can we get other cities and towns excited about smart cities? It's just sharing some of the best practice, some of the successes we've had.
No, I think that's exactly it. I think as we continue, we obviously come together occasionally as a group of managers, so I think taking that opportunity to share that information with the other managers, with other staff, to show them, that maybe it's not as complicated as thought, or maybe it's not as expensive as thought, or maybe there's an opportunity, particularly in a regional sense, to do things together. And so we see that already. We are already actively working with Carrie on a variety of projects, just traffic light maintenance and control. Again, I already mentioned the CAM model. So I think as you see that first success, you're then going to see the future successes be even easier. The first one works, everybody goes, wow, why did we wait so long to do that one? And then it just rolls into additional projects, and it gets creative. And again, there is some money out there for this. And so those collaborative grant applications are often looked at more favorably than a single jurisdiction. So I think bringing that to people's attention and sharing what's out there. But to some extent, it does take someone to step up and say, I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to make this important. And we certainly have the opportunity to do that within Wake County.
Fantastic. We're going to open it up just for the audience for a few minutes. We got 20 more minutes. And just introduce yourself, say where you're from, and then ask a question, and then please, thank you.
So John Polly, security technology consultant out of Charleston, South Carolina. And Brandon, you kind of touched on it in a second, but cities are made up of siloed stakeholders, right? And so it takes that champion at the highest level to get those silos to break down and say, we're going to work together, right? One of those silos can't make that happen. But once you go into the smart region, where does the champion come at from the smart region standpoint? You mentioned the grouping of town count or of city managers that are working together, but now you've got 4 or 5 people in there to do that. So elaborate from there.
Sure, thank you. I think it's interesting because my experience is that some of us often that may be in smaller jurisdictions tend to sit back and wait for the bigger folks to take that step, or we look to them to be the lead. But I think what we've seen with the success, again, of our staff and their approach to this is that we can be the leader in this. And I would like to think that at this point, Morrisville is at least one of the leaders in Wake County from an innovation standpoint, from bringing, again, you mentioned the different stakeholders. Our Smart Cities Steering Committee helps us tremendously with that, bringing those people together. And so then, again, we can do that, and we have the support, I believe, of our council to do that. That's always an important component because you may be sharing or even providing resources to other entities, but that's the future. I mean, anybody that doesn't think that regional approaches to government and to leadership we're behind the times if you're not doing that. So I think that it is changing that mindset of we always wait perhaps in Wake County for Raleigh or for the county to take the lead. There are opportunities when some of the other municipalities can step up. Again, proper leadership, proper support, and the staff that knows, what they're doing and is willing to take the step into that lead role, I think is critical.
If I can add to that, so we've in the Hampton Roads area, there are a dozen or so communities that have all come together very productively, and I think the way that evolved is it took 2 or 3 of the city managers to get together and say, yes, we ought to do this, and once that small group got together, nobody else wanted to be left out, right? So I think once you get that nucleus together, it can grow very rapidly, and it only takes a couple of leaders to take that first step.
Another question here.
Okay. Charlie Smith with Urban, this is loud, with Urban Integrated and Hewlett-Packard. On the last part of the statement up there, it says, how do we build a smart region? We're working with over 200 cities across the U.S. right now. We've had contact with Morrisville. And Morrisville is really no different than most of the cities characteristically. My question to the panel is this. Let me make it real simple for you. If a city's serious about becoming a smart city, we offer a workshop. We don't do it for free. Typically costs about $25,000, and we bring our high-level team in there. People like our chief scientist, who's got a PhD from MIT. And we spend a week, and we bring the department heads together and all of the relevant people. And that siloed feature really breaks down over the course of that week in that workshop because they get to know each other in a different way. Anyway, what we do is we identify the pain points of the city and the goals and the aspirations, and at the end of the day, about 30 or 40 days later, you're presented with a rough blueprint of where you're at and the steps to get to the next level. My question to the panel is, why is it so difficult for cities and regions to take this small step that gives them a blueprint, instead of we sit in a room with a bunch of people and we talk about all these lofty ideas, but my frustration, not just with this region, across the country, is that everybody wants to talk about these things, but then when it comes down to it, nobody's got the power to do anything. Most mayors can write a check for $25,000 without council approval. So my question for the panel is, how can we think differently about not just talking about these ideas, but actually being active in a powerful way to actually do something and pursue?
Thank you.
I'll take a quick whack at that. First thing I would say is even if it's not an issue of the cash, there's for public officials, there's a big risk factor, right? So I think getting most of your county or your locality staff together for a week and spending $25,000, that's a pretty big risk for most communities, right? I mean, and maybe not for larger cities, but for certainly a rural community, the budgets are strapped and everything, and people are busy doing their day job. So somebody has to advocate for the need for change, and it has to be somebody from the inside, right? I think you're lucky here to have great advocates locally, but that's not always the case. So it's really, my perception is it's a very one-on-one ground game to make that happen, and we're fortunate to be able to do that from my position, my staff. That's part of what we do is, hey, we can walk into a community as a trusted partner. We're from the state and we're here to help you, and take some of that financial risk and take some of that technology risk until a community's ready to kind of spin that up on their own.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a few more questions and we'll go back. I'm going to start with David I. One of the things that I've noticed is the global, how other nations are investing, globally in IoT and internet. One that comes to mind is India, who I had the honor of attending Prime Minister Modi's address to Congress in June. And what's amazing, and that's where my parents are from, but just in the last few years, India has connected about 700 million to the internet. Today, 1.2 billion have a digital identity. And they've had 87 startups out of the 100,000 that just were started in the last few years that are all billion-dollar companies. So, do you think that we also need to have a global perspective on this? And can you cite any examples globally of, what other regions are doing really well and what we can learn from?
Absolutely. Great question. So as a company leader for expanding what we've done overseas, actually in India is one of the areas our company has led the world. We have over a dozen smart cities. And some of these cities, challenges that you've cited that we've heard this morning, the challenges that are happening here, same types of challenges there we're seeing, but how do we overcome those? So one of the ways is being very open with the capability and coming in not from an OEM approach, but coming in not from a technology approach, but coming in from a people-centric approach. What do they want to achieve? How fast do they want to get there, beginning with the end in mind that I mentioned before? So cities like Pune and Bidkin, and most recently Lucknow. So these are cities where they've asked our company to come in, starting many, many years ago with some of these, build a way to drive crime down, make it easier for citizens for ingress and egress, make it easy with a one app or a one card application to move through the city, whether you're a citizen there, a visitor, or a tourist coming from somewhere else, keep safety at a high standard. The use of analytics, a lot of the things you saw this morning in the opening key remarks. So we've done this with these large cities, and some of these, like I mentioned, Bidkin, for example, they came out of the ground with almost no infrastructure. So we came in working with them in partnerships, strategic alliances, having these proof of concepts, having early discussions to be able to unite these different key stakeholders together so that we shorten the life cycle of getting them to the smart city. We drive their risk down. We provide a vendor agnostic approach. And you guys remember seeing that slide Jim put up this morning with the 10,000 companies up there and everyone was getting blurred vision? Okay, so we have a slide like that. Although we're technology driven because that's what, builds and brings the outcomes, bringing those cities together. So we're being recognized, we're in 70 countries, so we're being recognized as a smart city leader. And those challenges that we've overcome there, we want to try to help, drive those challenges down here as we expand across the U.S. markets as well. So we've done a lot of lessons learned, not enough time to dig into them now, but some amazing things we've done there that are bringing those cities not 10, 20 years to get there, but 1 to 4 years to get there, 1 to 6 years to get there. And they're achieving what they call the Star Wars era, the Star Trek era, and a lot of the capabilities so that the citizens don't have to think about the technology. It's just inherently there. It's intelligent. It's delivering the wisdom of the city and the wisdom of the occupants.
Good. I'm going to ask 1 or 2 more questions, open it back up to the audience. We've got a few more minutes, then I'll wrap up. What advice, I'm really excited about the startups that we're going to hear from soon. What advice do you have for tech startups in our region? Any applications to be thinking about?
Well,
or trends that you're seeing?
Sure. There are a lot of applications. I think every startup has its own story, its own market niche that it's going after. What we found to be most effective is involving the end user community in co-development. We're starting to characterize kind of the test bed that we operate as a proving ground for technology. And, we learn so much, the community learns so much, and the entrepreneurs learn when they put their product in the real world for the first time. And for example, we had a smart lighting pilot that we did. So we just put 3 poles up with smart lighting, and purely by accident, it turned out that each of those 3 ended up with a different mechanism for powering the light. One was directly connected, one had a battery backup, one had a solar panel on it, and we hadn't planned that ahead of time. And the vendor was like, well, we never thought of that. But now they have 3 solutions that they can offer to communities depending on the particular situation. So I think that ability to try stuff out in the operational settings and then co-develop with the end user community is really effective.
Fantastic. By the way, we also have the mayor of Wake Forest here. I want to thank Mayor Vivian Jones for being here, and we have Holly Springs as well. So it's good to see some cities I know here. I guess my one question, this is my own question, and Mary Ann Baldwin and I were talking about how we really needed a moment after we saw Clara to really sit down and soak it in. My gosh, this is quite amazing. Now I wish I had Clara, we had Clara so that residents wouldn't call me all the time with questions like, Steve, when does yard waste pick up? Or, how big can the wood, when we have shrubs, the twine and whatever, if they could just go to an AI agent, it would make life a lot easier and reduce the amount of emails that a lot of us get. But what were your thoughts about that, right? I mean, in terms of like, what is this gonna mean? And Brandon, I'm gonna start with you, just in terms of like, when you saw that, the resident calling in and asking questions, do you see that being something that, local governments could look to in terms of their smart city strategies?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's more efficient. It gives us greater flexibility. So, for example, in our community, we're approximately between 46 and 47% Asian Indian. So we unfortunately don't have a lot of staff that speak Hindi. And so we're doing a lot of work in that context and participating in a language access collaborative with UNC. But the ability to have that type of communication ability would be fantastic, because one of the things we find, it's not just the people that reach out to us and have challenges in communicating with us, it's the people that don't even reach out because they don't think they'll be able to communicate with us. So as you can use technology to overcome that, I mean, that just speaks to the power of what we could do, and it certainly reduces staff time, far more efficient in most cases than a phone call. Could be 24 hours a day. Just tremendous advantages for municipal application.
Well, just don't create AI council members, although that might make your life a lot easier.
We'll give it a little while.
That's for anyone in the state of North Carolina. What are your thoughts about AI? Just from your perspective.
So that's a loaded question.
I mean, just any kind of thoughts of how it fits into what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
So I think, we've been working with AI for quite a long time. And what we see happening is the automation of thought is entering into the full movement of AI. So instead of just knowing about someone or about a specific situation, AI is helping drive understanding the intent. So beyond what the about is, it's digging deeper into the intent. And then it can craft integration back with cloud support engines that will drive a solution and put that in place to help prevent situations like prevent bottlenecks, prevent crimes. It covers the what ifs. But it also helps with the increasing movement of safety and security all the way around. Because as we saw this morning again, in Jim's presentation, those bubbles of how you get down into the compute level, it's becoming fully automated in such a way where you won't have to think about it. When we get to the point where we're not having to think about the technology, things like seeing a route that Google Maps sends you on a different route to speed you to a location and it's green, it might be green because they're building a train track there and that's why there's no traffic there. And then you don't know that till you're there and you're like, what's going on? I got to turn around. So, it's a simple analogy, but these are some things that AI is going to help address, as well as the language, automatic, translation of language through an app. So integrating with the use cases, but also integrating very well with what the intent is, projecting that forward fast enough to where it's giving you a cleaner, faster outcome.
Fantastic. AI in terms of startups, do you think?
Yeah, so, and I will say I wrote my first paper on AI 45 years ago at the AI lab, so I'm a little bit cynical. There's huge potential, obviously, right? And I think a number of people are trying different aspects of artificial intelligence. From a governmental point of view, we're working to help define the policy and the implementation limitations at the state level in Virginia. What kinds of systems are reasonable to implement from a government point of view? What are the limits? And there are known issues with, for example, chatbots making up information that turns out not to be true, right? And I think back to the theme of starting small, taking those first steps. So For example, if we're looking at automating 911 calls, 911 dispatch, there's a very constrained vocabulary there. There's a very constrained set of mappings from what a citizen could call in and tell you to the set of actions that you'll do. So it's a bounded problem, and I think in those kinds of situations, AI can really provide many of the advantages that we're talking about. When I look more broadly at, if I have a data system and an AI entity comes knocking on the door and says, hey, I want access to your data, how do I know what that system is? How do I identify it? How do I validate it? How do I understand that it hasn't gone bad in the 6 months since it's been released into the wild? And so I think there are a lot of open questions, and I think it's very appropriate from a government point of view to go slowly and kind of try to build that understanding as we go.
Yeah, fantastic. We have 3 more minutes. So what I'll say about that is, when I interviewed John, I wrote an article on WL TechWire. What was interesting is his advice to entrepreneurs was there's a few applications of prime time, right? Call centers, automating that. Find those applications, fit into your business model, and then deliver the best service to your customers. So I think that kind of model could actually be applied to cities, right, eventually, for our smart city strategy. So maybe we'll do a follow-up panel on that. And there's a lot of challenges with AI. I guess, are there any final questions before we allow the panelists to close out with final thoughts? One final question.
Hello, I'm Adam Williams from AT&T FirstNet. We have a lot of value, a lot of customers, in the room here, and we really respect your relationship. My question is, what expectations do you have from a connectivity or tech company would you have a relationship with to provide education on IoT?
So I'll start with the example. We're doing a lot with the use of drones and introducing those to the public. So we've started certainly to support emergency management, starting to deliver medicines to remote communities, those kinds of things. The critical aspect of the partnership is for the drone operators or the manufacturers to do that public outreach and to help build that community trust, right? I mean, the first reaction in the communities we went into was we don't want those things because they're going to be watching me in my backyard kind of stuff. And I think the ability of the industry partners to demonstrate those positive community use cases has been critical. And I think that's true kind of across the board.
Any final thoughts before we allow each panelist to just give 30 seconds, just wrap up of what you'd like us to take away? And we really want to thank you for being on the panel. Brandon.
Thank you. Again, I think, get engaged. I think ask peer communities if you are in a municipality, what is someone else doing? How did you get started? How did you do this? What's working and what's not working? Learn from each other's successes and challenges as you go. And then I was really listening to the AI conversation. The other thing I think I need to mention is just also use caution. And I think I'm preaching to the choir, but over-reliance on AI is a real concern of mine. And that's at all various levels of the organization. But one little example, and this isn't AI per se, but police officers, firefighters now rely on their laptops to pop up not only with a call for service, but here's the map of how you get there. And so when a police officer comes in one day and says, "Well, my laptop's working, I don't know how I can work today," and that happened to be in Garner. I may have given them a look that they didn't like because I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, a little while ago, we had not a lot of equipment at all other than a flashlight and a baton and, handgun, and it seemed to work okay. But I just relate that back to even in municipal government and even other operations, we want to make sure that it's a tool, but not the tool.
Yeah, a tool. Yeah, that's right. Any final insights as we wrap up?
Final, I think, in the space you asked me about India, so we see a lot of things going on around the world as a company, and myself included, because other communities globally, they're taking steps very quick, so they're not waiting at all. You can go out in the middle of the jungles of Australia or out in the deserts, and the guys got iPhones and everything, and so we want to try to expedite it. Don't let technology stay in the way. Don't worry about what technology do I need to get this outcome. Partnering up with strategic partners like myself, with our companies, with municipalities together, We specialize in being able to drive that risk down, find the right partnerships, or we have them in place already, and remove a lot of the minutia that is driven into all these millions of technologies, systems, capabilities. So don't be afraid to reach out, to an SI, an MSI that has experience, they're vendor agnostic like ourselves, that are able to bring the value of what your vision is and how to capture that and how to strategically align with partnerships. I mentioned the partnerships of a utility with a telecom company, with the cloud company, with the city, county, all these four things together. Standing by themselves, they're in silos because they're each going after their own needs. But partnering up with the right partnerships to help drive that timeline down and keep the risk low. Just don't be afraid. Go ahead and jump in and let the partners work with you to bring that to bear.
Final thought before we lunch.
Yeah, so, just over a month ago, the FEMA administrator, Deanna Criswell, gave an awesome speech to the National Emergency Management Association. It's worth checking it out. Part of that was her quote, and I'm paraphrasing, "What keeps me up at night is the threat from nation-state actors and what they're threatening for our homeland security." And she went on to say the way we're going to combat that as a company, as a country, is collaborating, is working together more closely across industry, across government, across local government, state and national government. And the mechanism to do that is better information sharing. So, to me, that's why I'm here. That's one of the things that's driving me these days. I hope we can, between Virginia and North Carolina, between our communities and the communities here, how can we make that happen? And we're all in on that.
Well, thank you so much. So as we close out, I just want to thank the City of Raleigh, John Holden, and everybody for putting together this wonderful conference. I think it's the beginning of developing a playbook on how we can become the smartest region in the country and how North Carolina can become the smartest state in the country. And maybe that's something the ex-governor of North Carolina focused on. But with that being said, let's give a round of applause to our panel.